The other part that most people think of when they say the White House is the political White House, and that's the West Wing. Of course, there's also a TV show now called The West Wing. I have to be honest, I've never watched it. Don't intend to because I live with this every day. I don't need to watch it on television. It's fictionalized. I don't know whether any of you have seen it or not, but I'm told that one of the things that people who do watch it that have some familiarization with the White House is that the halls, there's always people crossing and there's a lot of activity. West Wing is like a library. There's 6 people in the halls during the course of the entire day. People are working over there. There's not all this activity going back and forth. So enough social commentary on the TV show. To this day, when you hear people say, today the White House said, they're talking about the West Wing. I'm still looking for that mouth. The White House has never had a mouth, but that's the first thing that the reporters say, today the White House said. And normally they're talking about the political White House. The Chief Usher's responsibility, I have a staff of 95 people who take care of the executive residence. I'm also responsible for the grounds on which the White House sits, which is approximately 18 acres. The National Park Service has the White House grounds as reservation number 1 in the National Park Service system, and they provide a staff of 34 people to take care of the grounds. And I have a superintendent that's on my staff who supervises, probably one of the only places in the government where I supervise another agency's employees. It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there. But that's the way the White House is operated. Actually, some of the other contrarian kind of circumstances in management of the White House is that both the West Wing and this building are owned by the General Services Administration and administered by the General Services Administration because they're office buildings. And that's government offices are administered by the General Services Administration. So it's kind of an unusual circumstance. There's a lot of acting agencies. The National Park Service, as I said, I work very closely with them because they're actually the site on which the White House sits, which is reservation number 1 in the Park Service system. They're also have a responsibility for the exterior of the building, which is kind of curious that they don't have any responsibility for the inside. Then the military have an activity here at the White House. Certainly the President's Commander-in-Chief has to have a military component here at the White House when the President flies off by the helicopter. You've all seen the helicopter go in and out, I'm sure, on television. That's obviously a military operation, and that's run by the military office, which is located upstairs here in this building. Then the General Services Administration, and there's a lot of other activities and agencies that are associated with the White House. My staff of 95 is responsible for the operation and maintenance of the executive residence. That includes butlers, maids, the kitchen staff, the chefs, the pastry chef, engineers, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, the paint shop, florists who take care, and you'll see as you go through today there are floral arrangements. There's one on the table back there. There's wonderful roses, very nicely done. Throughout the house we have floral arrangements. They're not dried flowers because in my tenure here there have been a lot of recommendations from a budget standpoint and also a personnel standpoint. Why don't we do dried flowers? That way they don't have to change very often. The White House is not a static environment. It's a museum. I have curators on my staff that take care of the curatorial responsibility at the White House. But the White House is a living environment and feel that it's very important that when people come through here, they understand they're coming through the President and First Lady's home. And live, fresh flowers is part of that ambiance, as it is for various events that we have, including the most formal, which is a state dinner, a visit of a foreign head of state to the White House. So I have a really varied staff, and I get involved in a little bit of everything, whether I like it or not. Just before I came over and met with you all, I was over on the west side, and we were talking about taking out trees and putting in new trees because the old trees are dying because the root balls aren't large enough and we don't have enough drainage. And so I get involved in a little bit of everything. As Ward said in his opening remarks, I have an opportunity from time to time to put hoses out and sprinklers and everything. All of us that work in the executive residence have a job title. That job title begins with a description of what position they're hired in. But the last part of that is probably more important than anything else, and that's whatever is required. So we can have an electrician or a carpenter, and that's their job title, but the last part of that is you'll do whatever you're required to do. And everybody here understands that. And it's not something that's forced upon people. The majority of the people that come here, unlike the political staff that are on my staff, either retire from the position or they leave early on in their career, in the first 5 years. If they stay past 5 years, normally they're here for their entire career. Now, from a political standpoint, people are looking at 4 or 8 years at the outside, 1 administration or 2 administrations. But very seldom do people stay an entire administration. Let's face it, if you're going to be out of here after 4 years, come that 3rd year, you're starting to look for another job. Or in this case, with this president and the former president, also President Clinton, you get towards that 7-year mark, and there is no 4-year extension. So there's a lot of people that are doing, you'll see that occur. If you didn't in the previous administration, the Clinton administration, maybe you weren't attuned to it at that point. Certainly, as you get towards the end of this administration, there'll be some additional changes because people will have been here and they'll be starting to look for other jobs, so there'll be some turnover. Our staff, at one point, we had the average tenure of the resident staff was in excess of 22 years. And that was the average tenure of the staff. As I said, I've been privileged to be here now 36 years. My predecessor had been here in various capacities for 27 years. So there are a number of people that have spent long careers here. We had one gentleman who spent 43 years here. He was our chief electrician. He spanned back to President Truman when President Truman lived across the street in Blair House, across from the White House, and that White House was rebuilt, and he remembers walking fire watch at night through the excavated building. So there's a lot of history in our staff that's embodied in what we do on a daily basis. We take care of the President and the First Lady from a home aspect. The 3 jobs that we have and that I particularly am in charge of is, number 1, the President's home. That's the first and foremost. That comes out in everything we do. We're taking care of the President's home. Yes?
Did you choose this particular career, or do you think it sort of chose you?
Exactly. It chose me. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I actually grew up here in the Washington area. My father's brother used to come in back, this was a number of years ago, back in the 50s, and spray the White House lawn to kill bugs and things on the lawn. And I used to drive by. My father actually worked here in Washington as a bus driver. And I never thought I was going to be inside the gate. Of course, I came in like everybody else did, tour and had friends in from out of town. That's when you go to the White House. But I never dreamed of working inside these gates. It's been quite a privilege, and I've had an opportunity to see a huge amount of history in the years that I've been here. But no, I think I was in the right place at the right time. I had an opportunity to be here, as I said, with the Uniform Division of the Secret Service, which at that time was called the Executive Protective Service. And my first introduction here was, we went to classroom studies, and had to learn a lot. And then we were brought over here to walk around and see the different positions, because as you may have noticed in the short period of time you came in, you went through a number of different police posts. As you came through each gate, there was a different set of policemen. And those are called rings of security. And the outermost ring is where the youngest people are. So my first few impressions here was as a police officer and walking around the outside, and a realization that I was actually on the inside where most people wanted to be. And I've told the story before. I was working right out here at this post on East Executive Avenue. East Executive Avenue used to be open to the public. It used to be a thoroughfare. Street was open. That didn't get closed down until after the bombing in Beirut in the Reagan administration. And I had a woman come up to the gate one evening about dusk, and she said, "I'm only in town for 1 day, and I can't get into the White House to see the White House. Would you pick a leaf off of the tree and give it to me? I have to have some memento of being at the White House." I mean, that profoundly affected me. The fact that these people were on the outside of the gate, and this woman wanted a leaf from inside to just take with her. So my first day was really a day of feeling my way around the outside and getting an idea of what goes on inside the gate, but on the outside perimeter. I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but that was really the first impression I had of the White House. It was really being on the perimeter, but yet being inside the place that everybody else wanted to be.
What do you think is the biggest surprise for the first family when moving into the White House?
The biggest surprise. The exposure, the lack of privacy, the fact that the White House is not as big as it looks on television. The camera has as you well know as a cameraman over there, has an ability to make things look bigger than they are. If you ever look at the East Room of the White House and when they have these press conferences, it looks enormous. When you get up there today, you'll see it's 80 feet by 40 feet, roughly. It's not that big. The state dining room, we put 130 people in there for dinners. It's not that big. I think the fact that the family gets caught up in the campaigning, and when they come to the White House, they can't get, the campaign's over, but you can't get away from that aspect because the press are right there in the West Wing. The president's got to walk past the press office to get to his office every day and every evening. Not that the press are allowed to be out there at that time, but he has to go right past them. I don't know whether you've seen any of these motorcades when the president travels on television. There's 30 cars almost that are involved with the police and the escorts and the staff vans and the press vans and everything that goes on. You can't go anywhere. President goes to ride his bike. This president goes to ride his bike, and there's 3 Secret Service agents, one in front of him, if he can keep in front of him, one beside him, and one behind him. There's very little privacy. A lot of that is more recently obviously driven by just security, the requirements that are out there, but that hasn't really changed a great deal since the Kennedy administration, when things tightened down, since President Kennedy was assassinated. So I think that's the biggest change that they have to go through, is the fact that they, even though they're off the campaign trail, you don't get away from the exposure.
Does your job description change a lot from administration to administration?
No, not really. White House stays the same size, thank goodness. But it's our responsibility to adapt to the President and the First Lady and their wishes, and I think that's a tribute to the staff and the fact that we've had very few turnovers because of a change in administration. In the 36 years that I've been here, there's only been 5 people that have been asked to leave of the staff that's been here. And that's been because of most of them have been creative people. They're the ones that are most vulnerable because they can translate what they do to what the new president and the first lady would like done. In the kitchen from time to time, in the flower shop from time to time, but for the most part, we adapt well. And it's our responsibility to adapt to them, not for them to adapt to us. The staff has, the president's staff has a difficult time sometimes adapting to the White House after the election's over, because the White House isn't this big expansive country. It's really down to a smaller venue, and where you could have 5,000 or 10,000 people at a rally in Omaha, Nebraska, you're looking at 300 for a reception at the White House and 98 people for a press conference. So that the staff has more difficulty adapting to the White House. The families, we try and give them a home environment on the 2nd and 3rd floor, which is their primary residence area, that they can go into and feel comfortable in. So we try and adapt to them. On inaugural day, it's our responsibility to move one family out from the time they leave the White House, which is usually about 10 o'clock in the morning. The new family comes back into the White House after the inaugural parade on Pennsylvania Avenue at about 5 o'clock. And our intent is to have the family that's moving out moved out, and the new family that's coming in moved in, to the point where there are no boxes, that their clothes are hung in their closets, that furniture is exchanged the way they would like to see it arranged, which of course we talked to them beforehand, that there are not people running around helter-skelter, so that when they come to their home, their new home. It is something that they're familiar with and something that they can move right into.
Gary, I would just want to interject a question that occurred to me since we've been having this conversation for so many years. I notice I've been here early in administrations, I've been here in the middle, and I've been at the end of administrations. And I notice that the people who come to work here as staff really grow in this job. They're not the same people that leave as they are when they come. There's something about being here that deepens and changes people. And I notice that, in the beginning there's this kind of excitement and we can take on the world and we got elected and we've got it all right. And then I notice there's kind of a growing humility and kindness that I see as people extend here longer. Can you say something about what this place does to the people who work here?
Oh, it does so many different things to so many people. It is a humbling experience coming through the gate every day, knowing that we're involved in things that are taking place around the world. Certainly there's something afoot in the Middle East right now. President's meeting with new Prime Minister of Israel. There's a new government in Iraq, and 2 weeks from today or tomorrow, the new ambassador from that government is going to present his credentials to the president here at the White House. So there's something afoot, and there's always something afoot. And I think that's what some of what you see is when the staffs come in initially, there is this initial excitement and look, I'm involved and all this is going on. And then the reality hits, 12, 14-hour days, and things kind of tamp down a little bit. And then the next side of reality hits, which is, oh my God, I'm involved. This is something that will be in the history books. And I actually have an opportunity to get involved in it. Might be a little thing. I took a note to somebody who was going to then talk to the president, but I was there when that happened. And I think that's part of what you see is a realization after the exhaustion, because the exhaustion never goes away, but the realization that you can get involved in something. And I think that's what people do. And I've been here long enough to see people go away for 10 years and come back in a different job. And obviously, a government employee is not making a multi-million-dollar salary. The president doesn't. There are a lot of people making a whole lot more money than the president. So there has to be something that's attuned to what goes on here at the White House and in government in general. And the fact that government service is an important piece of that. I think there's some realization. People come, people go, people come back. And when they come back, they have a different grasp. They bring different experiences with them when they return. While they're here, you're brought so quickly from a juvenile status to a main stage status that if you don't grow, you get broken. And those are the people that leave. After 9/11, there were some people here that physically could not take the mental anguish of being in a place that somebody else might possibly want to blow up. It was always in the back of somebody's mind, but it actually happened with the Pentagon. Possibly the other plane that was crashed in Pennsylvania was either aimed for the Capitol or the White House. And there were some people that, although they knew it in the back of their mind, that actual act broke some people down, and they could not stay here any longer, and they left. So there's this compressed in 4 years, and 4 years can be a long time, especially at your age. But believe me, when you get older, it gets an awful lot shorter. But you get compressed, the information that you have, and especially being here, really gets compressed. And you get to really have to digest that information quickly and move on. And it never stops. There's always a new project. There's always something new. You never know what's going to happen the next day. And I think that's one of the things that I admire about the presidents. You asked earlier about the presidents and what, how they react sometimes, and it's the presidents don't know what they're going to get involved in. Take a look at any president, recent history, what they look like on their inaugural day and what they look like after they left the White House. I guarantee you, you'll see a change, and it's in the white or gray hair. And some of those men have only been here 4 years. And look at other people that have been someplace for 4 years. They don't age like that. It's an awesome responsibility that the president bears on his shoulders. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why anybody wants the job. You don't get away from the responsibility. Forget what the press say about the president goes on vacation and he's just, out there doing whatever he wants to do. If the president, any of them, gets an hour to themselves in the course of the day, that's a lot of time. And they never get away from the morning briefings, the afternoon briefings, the evening briefings, the reams of paper. President Nixon, he was recognized as, of course, he was responsible for opening back up American policy with China. He was an expert on China. He was sent as an emissary, actually, by President Reagan to China. President Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, was the first ambassador to China, succeeding that. I forgot where I was going now when I got off to President Bush. But
You're talking about how much these guys, how much work they do,
oh yeah,
and how they study.
President Nixon in particular would come home at night, literally to the residence, and he would bring a stack of folders, position papers, have the valet carry them, and the valet would be carrying them, and they'd be, up almost to the top of his head. And he'd go upstairs on the second floor, and he'd put this stack of papers down by him, these valises and folders and binders, and he became an expert on China, not by absorbing it by what other people, he read, voraciously read all these papers. And as I said earlier, we were talking about briefly about where do you get your information? Multiple sources. The president read, and he didn't become an expert on China from listening to his advisors in the State Department tell him what it's about. He read and read and read and took all that into account and then made his decisions based on that. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it's good.
Hi.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about how other people felt on 9/11, but I was curious how you dealt with 9/11 and how you felt on that day.
Wow. It was a quite emotional day. What some people don't realize on that date is we were having a congressional picnic that night. Had the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, had this occurred in the evening instead of in the morning, the entire United States Congress, the entire executive branch, president, vice president, cabinet, would have been on the south grounds of the White House that night, 5 o'clock. So we were all set up. We had tables, and it was going to be a kind of a chuckboard barbecue that we were doing outside. We had chuck wagons and tables set up, and picnic tables. There were about 160 picnic tables in the south ground, a big stage off to the side and everything. And I was in the process of setting that up and getting ready for that evening's activities when I got the first word of the first plane going into the World Trade Center in New York, and subsequently the second one. At that point, I realized that we were under attack. Didn't take me long to make some decisions that I had to make. I knew the president was down in Florida. I don't know whether you remember that or not, but he was down in Florida speaking to a group of children in a school when this occurred. I had a whole series of things that I had to do, but the first thing that came to my mind was the president's coming back to the White House, and I've got to get stuff cleaned off of the south grounds because they're going to want to land on the south grounds. Well, the picnic tables we have weigh about 350 pounds each, and there are 150 of them out there. As I walked out of the south portico, once I'd gotten my thoughts together and gotten people together, which took about 5 minutes to get people in place to start moving stuff, as I walked out of the south portico, I saw the fireball in the Pentagon above the trees, because you can't see the Pentagon from the south portico of the White House, but I saw the fireball. At that point, the police started telling people to get out. I don't know whether you saw those pictures or not, but you saw police telling everybody to run, and everybody was running towards Pennsylvania Avenue in the north. And I'm screaming to tell people to run south, because if a plane was going to come into the White House, it's going to come into the largest surface, which is the south side of the building, and any debris is going to go north. So I'm trying to tell people to go south instead of going north. But I was able to keep about 6 people here with me, and we stood on the south grounds on the knoll out here for 8 hours. And as time allowed, with the assistance of the police officers, we were able to move all those picnic tables by hand. And that night, the president landed. If you ever get a chance to look at that again, when the president walks to the office, you'll see a bunch of picnic tables stacked 3 high as the president walks past them going back to the Oval Office, because we stayed here as a staff and cleaned off the grounds so that the president could make that speech that night from the Oval Office when he returned to the White House. So those are the kinds of things that we get involved in, and that was quite an emotional day. I ended up spending 3 days here because at that point none of us knew what was going to occur. Intervening days. Sir?
It's amazing how you could unite and organize in such a time of peril. And I was wondering if maybe some of the best works and some of the most united and coordinated action happens in some of our country's darkest times.
I think if you have the proper thought processes, that people are thinking about how things fit together, nobody could have, and nobody did obviously, think about the tragic nature of 9/11. But there were natural fallouts that went from that, things that went, some planning, strategic planning. Obviously the Vice President, Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor were taken to certain areas where they were protected, and the President, they put him up in an aircraft, flew around for a while till they decided where to go. So there were some contingency plans. They weren't specific to that incident, but there were some specific plans. And I think that people who have, and I'm not talking about myself in this case, there are people that are in place for a reason, because they have that ability to do strategic planning on the fly. That's why we have, some of our greatest thinkers are in the military. They're wonderful people that are able to react in times of crisis. We've seen presidents who have done unbelievable things in times of crisis. So I think it's some thought process that people go through beforehand. You have some idea of what considerations. You play baseball?
No.
Okay.
Play volleyball.
Volleyball? Same thing, anticipation. What direction is the ball going to be struck? Where do I want to hit it next? That usually is running through your mind very quickly in the course of when somebody else is getting ready to hit the ball to you. You're already thinking about, how can I get to the spot that I want to get to return this ball, or to set it up for the man on the front line, or is there an open space in the back? It's incredible what our mind can do in such a short period of time. I wonder if you've been in a car accident or had a serious accident. Can you think about the span of time and what went through your mind in that span of time? It's like it happens in a millisecond, but the thoughts that go through your mind. Where's my family? Do I need to put my arm out? Do I need to duck? I mean, it's amazing what your mind can do in that fraction of a second leading up to something like that. And I think that's what, there's some people that have an ability to do that on the fly. And we're lucky in this country, we have a lot of them in places where they need to be.
Thank you.
My name's Alyssa, and our closer for the interview, we asked the same question to everyone, and it is, what is the most important piece of advice you can give for our generation?
Get involved and stay involved. Getting involved and dropping something is not the same as getting involved and staying involved. It was like I was saying earlier, whatever you're going to get involved in, do it to the best of your ability, try to make the best of it. And if you don't like it, move on. But when you get involved in something, you usually are going to get involved in it because you enjoy it. And stick with it, and do things that give you some pleasure, because that'll give you more incentive to stay with it. You can't live life and not be involved. If you're not involved in something, you're just kind of play acting. So you need to be in a circumstance where you can enjoy yourself while you're doing something that's productive. I mean, sitting under a tree and looking at the leaves is great, but you can only do that so long. Now, maybe you want to prune the tree, or see what kind of fruit is on the tree. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's involvement. You can't beat involvement. and long-time involvement. I think a lot of people that talk to people who have made a career out of helping other people. You know, people work for the Red Cross and various. They do it because they like what they're doing. They don't do it because it's a civic duty in most cases. They really like what they're doing.
Gary, you know, clearly you're in a service position, if there ever was one. This is service. And I know that inevitably you've made sacrifices. I know you have. I remember one year when we came and your daughter was applying for college. Remember you asked the kids what...
Scared me to death.
I know. You made the mistake of asking us for some advice, and they said, don't worry, if she doesn't like the college she's in, she can pick another one. We teach our kids to be adaptable, you know. But do you really see it as a net sacrifice, or do you see it as a net gain, all that you've contributed?
For me.
Yeah. Because I know you've made sacrifices.
Personally, it's been a tremendous opportunity for me. I can't tell you the amount of history that I've had an opportunity to be involved in. Not witness, but literally be involved in. A little corner over here someplace, but at least I was involved. Some decisions that I've made that have affected a lot of things that go on around here. Some of them deal with making the president and their family happy. President 41, I'll refer to him as this president's father, when they had their 50th wedding anniversary, I invited the military band, just a couple of members, to play a favorite song of theirs, and invited them downstairs on the pretext of needing to look at something in the East Room. And they came down the steps, and I was able to have the orchestra, 6 members of the orchestra there, to play a favorite song of theirs. Little things like that, bringing happiness to other people. For me, I think my family's probably the ones that have taken the greatest hit. I have a daughter and a wife, obviously, who've spent time at home wondering what I'm doing, and sometimes not being able to get a hold of me or not seeing me for a few days at a time. So I think that's, if I had a regret, that's it. I didn't have as much time, although I tried to, I made time. I took time. My daughter was in gymnastics, so I made sure that I went on Saturday and spent 6 hours sitting in the bleachers while she performed for 35 seconds. But that, you know, those are things you have to do at times, you know. So it's a sacrifice, a family sacrifice, but I've had an opportunity to make the families that live here, hopefully their lives a little bit better, protected their privacy, and had an opportunity, as I said, to see a lot of history. So it's not something I'd trade.
What college did your daughter go to?
Boston College.
Boston College. And she's graduated?
Great school, even though they did have some problems this past couple of days with Secretary Rice up there. But I understand she got, she graduated with honors. Made the decision to go to that school based on the fact that she wanted to be involved in the academic program that they had, as well as she was in gymnastics from the time she was 3 years old. They didn't have a gymnastics program, but so she got involved in cheerleading at Boston College and was the head of the cheerleading squad for 3 years, and for 2 years also a cheerleader for the Boston Celtics, because they didn't have the group of ladies on the court that danced. She liked the acrobatics of being thrown in the air and being caught. I like the caught part myself. I thought that was an important part of the operation. So she's doing wonderful. Thank you for asking. But it's a sacrifice. If you ask them, I think they'd understand what I've done. And they've had the benefits of being at the White House. We have a picture, my daughter does, of every year of her life being with the president at Christmas time and having a photograph. So from the time she was a babe in arms and until this past Christmas, have a photograph of her with the president of the United States at Christmas time. So there are benefits that go along with it, but hardships too.
Incredible, Gary. Thank you so much.